welcome to our February user group meetup of the PowerShell user group. Topic for today is Entra ID automation using Graph X-Ray. Very excited about this. Short introduction about myself. I am Konstantin. Twitter handles are there for the user group, and above is mine, and we can also connect on LinkedIn if you want. Short plug for my user group. CFPs are open on Sessionize, so all appointments for the whole year are published, and if you want to if you want to have a session in my user group, you can do a you can send the session to me, and I will contact you about the organization and the whole stuff, and send you the email and so on. If you have any questions, you can also contact me if you want. Then some stuff about myself. I will be speaking to in this year in Antwerp this year at the PSConf EU. First topic will be development environment for PowerShell Universal, and second will be a fully automated SQL Server lab with automated lab. And shameless plug if you don't have your ticket or don't know where you want to go or don't know where to attend this year or which conference to attend this year, please think about the PSConf EU. Tickets are on sale already, so you can order your ticket there. So then, housekeeping session will be recorded. Please mute your mics so Fabian won't have any disturbance on the on the sound. And I will monitor the chat if there are any questions. And if you want to ask a question, you can unmute and I think disturb Fabian. I will also ask questions. And let's make this a bit interactive. And today's speaker is Fabian Bader. I think he can also introduce himself. And Fabian, stage is yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for this introduction. Hello everybody. Nice to be here. And today we will be talking about Entra ID automation with Graph X-Ray. So for everybody who's not speaking German, the slide is in German, but all the other slides will be in English, and I will also talk English over the whole thing, so that should be fine. Who am I? I'm Fabian Bader. I work as a cybersecurity architect at Clucania, and I also do blogs on cloudbrothers.info. You can find me on all the socials. I also have a user group for PowerShell, the Hamburg PowerShell user group. You are also invited to join. It's hybrid, and we meet every 2 months. And the other 2 months, I host the Purple Elbe security user group in Hamburg, and this is also hybrid. So if you want to join, please feel free. And about me, I'm a Microsoft MVP and work mostly with cloud technologies today. So the topic we have today is more about the identity part I'm working with, but I also do a lot of stuff in the whole security space. So everything Sentinel, Defender, whatever Microsoft names it today, you will find in my expertise as well. You can also come to my sessions when you visit Antwerp this year, and I hope you do. The PowerShell conference in Europe is a great opportunity to meet a lot of other great speakers and myself and Konstantin, of course. I will talk about a new automation framework called Master. You will also meet my co-author in the talk today, because Meryl, who will or is developing the Master framework with me together, will has also a part in the talk I'm doing today. And the other thing is about Microsoft Sentinel life cycle management at scale, how we internally scale our deployment of Sentinel and analytic rules and everything around that. So I think 2 very interesting topics, and I hope to see you there. But now back to our talk of today, Microsoft Graph and Entra ID. I will go a bit back in time and first talk about why we are here today and why we are talking about that. So, as most of you who work with Entra ID, or as it was called before, Azure AD, might know, there are already some great commandlets out there. There was the MSOL commandlets and also the Azure AD commandlets that could be used to manage your whole cloud infrastructure, as in identity-wise infrastructure. But a few years ago, 4 years ago now, there was the first announcement that Alex Simmons did, that the backend, the Microsoft Authentication Library and everything are going to be updated and only to support the Microsoft Graph API in the future. As you can see in this blog post that was updated quite a while ago again in March 2022, because Microsoft decided to postpone the retirement of Azure AD Graph API for another few years. And since we talk about this in 2024, you might know, okay, it's still there and you can still use it. And in December, they extended the whole ADL end of support to last year in June. So starting June 30th, the ADL was retired, and also the Azure AD Graph API was retired at that time. This did not mean that the commandlets didn't work anymore, but it meant that now Microsoft has done their official announcement. They are going to retire it, and this has implications on support and how long they have to offer support for stuff like that. And with the official announcement of that, we now also got the information that the PowerShell module, of course, will also be retired, because the whole backend of this module was reliant on the Azure AD Graph to work. With now Microsoft Graph in the picture and Azure AD Graph no longer there, we had to do something, and that meant we have a deadline, and this deadline is March 30th this year. The deprecation of this commandlet will be on that date. What exactly this means and how this will impact the commandlets at that date, we all don't know. I think Microsoft themselves are not yet sure what they are going to do on that date, if they really shut it down or if they shut it down for tenants not using it. I think they will go for the latter and send eager warnings to the message center of tenants that still use scripts that use the Azure AD PowerShell modules. But the end is near, I would say, and we all have to adapt to this to make sure that our automations that we have in our environments still work after this date. With that, let's talk a bit about the Microsoft Graph API. The Graph API of Microsoft is one of many Graph APIs out there. Many large cloud providers now have some API, and it's called Graph. Why is that? Because as you can see on this picture, you have those different entities here. Those are mostly named nodes in a graph. So we have something like a calendar, and in this calendar might be some meetings. We have groups, we have files, all this stuff. This is all a graph node, and then we have relations between them. Those relations are often also referred as edges, meaning that somebody who is member of a group might have the member of edge to this group, and also a group might have access to a file. And those combinations are all saved and available through an API, through the Microsoft Graph API. And Microsoft is developing this for anything new that is coming to the product, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. Sometimes they are still internal APIs only, but the goal of Microsoft in the end is to provide every possible change, every possible object that you might want to do something with through the Graph API, and offer you a way to manipulate, create, delete those objects with the Microsoft Graph API. How aware are you? So is Graph API for everybody in the chat? Yeah, I know that. I use it all day, and you don't tell me anything new, or is it more like, okay, yeah, I heard the name, but never used it? Maybe give a thumbs up if you have used it, or
raise a hand
laughing
also.
icon or something if you never heard of it.
Never heard of it? Okay.
I think the thumbs up is mostly for people who have heard about it, and yeah, perfect.
Never heard of it. Okay. So we have at least one.
Okay, we have at least one. Also somebody who has not used it. Okay, that's perfect. Because when you got to start using the Microsoft PowerShell SDK, as Microsoft is now calling it, you will fast recognize that there are major differences from what you are used to if you have ever used the Azure AD modules. And this is not only because most of the documentation is completely auto-generated and can be a bit of, let's say, not optimal documentation as you would expect it. They
and also
work on that, and
also the commandlets, the name of the commandlets can be very long and adventurous. Yes.
Yes, definitely. So what Microsoft is doing in the backend, they have something called, I think it's Swagger, an endpoint where it is all described how the Graph API, which endpoints there are, which nodes you can connect to, everything like that is defined in a programmatical readable format. And out of this, they generate new commandlets for the PowerShell SDK. And for some of the stuff, they also have in between some human touch. So there is documentation written by humans, and this is the one you like to look at and you can work with. And then there's stuff that is completely new, brand new. And this is mostly not really well documented. The ability to use stuff like pipelining as you would normally do in PowerShell is sometimes very limited because it's not that optimal how they integrated that. So there are different challenges from how those commandlets are generated and also how you can use them. But we have the challenge, we need to migrate our scripts. While this is not the main topic of the talk, we have to touch it because this is for most of the people are getting into the whole thing. And for that, let's have a look at what this Graph API is looking like and what you can expect if you want to work with it. And now I have to find the correct window to share. As always with Teams, it's a bit of a challenge. So first, let me just give you a list of the modules.
Short, Fabian, can you make this a bit bigger? So your
Of
window
course,
and
yeah, sure.
the font size a bit bigger?
Let me just try to. I hope this is more readable to anybody.
Yeah. I think that's okay.
Just will do. Yeah. So as you can see, there are not only one module that has the name Graph in, but multiple ones. And there are stuff like the Microsoft Graph, and then there's the Microsoft Graph Beta. We will talk about the different endpoints later on. Then we have submodules called Microsoft Graph Applications, Authentication, Beta Calendar, Beta Groups, and in all of those, there are a multitude of different commandlets available. First thing to note is that the Microsoft Graph module itself is not much of a module. It's more a helper wrapper around all the other modules that start with Microsoft Graph and don't have beta in the name. This is like if you have ever worked with the Azure modules the same way. So if you be like install module AZ for the new Azure modules, in the backend, it will download like, I don't know, 25 something other modules and install them for you, because it's just being like, okay, you want to work with Azure? Here's everything we got to work with Azure. And as in Azure, Microsoft Graph is really rich and really powerful, and there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. So if you just install Microsoft Graph on your machine, you might end up with commandlets you will never use and you never will really need. On your developer machine, that might be fine, but later on, if you do scripting and you have something like an automation account or a runner, and you only want to have installed those modules you really want to use, then it's important to figure out which submodules are really interesting for you and to install only those. For all of these different modules you see here, there's always one with Graph and one with Graph Beta. But there's one exception, and this is the Microsoft Graph Authentication. This is the one and only module you can use to authenticate, to connect to the Microsoft Graph itself. And there are a few different other helper modules in there, as we will see as we progress. But now let's have a quick look. I will just get a list of all the regular commands and the beta commands. And as you will see, there is quite a lot of different commandlets. So for the production-ready V1 endpoint, we have about 8,334 different commandlets that you can use. And for the beta endpoint, it's even more. It's about 5,000 more commandlets. So if you are like me, a normal human being, you are not able to remember all those commandlets. So it's a real challenge to find the correct one, and how to figure out which one to use now can be really challenging. And as Konstantin already mentioned, it's not only about the sheer amount of different commandlets that makes this a big challenge. It's also about the naming. Thank you for Nathan McNulty here. He had posted a really nice script that I will just use. And this is getting all the commands and will give us the one with the longest name that is available. And for your amusement, I will try to spell it out correctly. So today we have the longest commandlet name. Let's see. And it is... It's just 134 characters long, and it is the get mg beta identity authentication event flow on authentication method load start as on authentication method load start external user self-service sign up. That rolls off the tongue like honey. No problem at all. You will remember this commandlet, of course, and you are definitely use it all the time.
And you definitely know what to do with it.
Of course, it's self-explanatory. It's really easy to read. So as you can see, it's not as easy as we might have known it from the old way of doing management in Azure AD. But on the other hand, this is an extreme case. You can do so many things in the graph, but if we are looking at what we want to do management of Entra ID, and our use cases might be related to users, groups, conditional access policies, stuff like that. Then the whole amount of commandlets gets a little bit more handleable, and also they have better names in many cases. So let me switch over to the sharing. Andreas, do you have the hand up because you wanted to say something or ask something, or just the reaction? And I think it was the reaction. Perfect.
Just a reaction.
So Microsoft is trying to assist us here. What they have done is they have created a website where you can look up all the old names and the new names. So for administrative units, we have the get Azure ADMS administrative unit, and the new one is get MG directory administrative unit. So naming isn't that hard in that case. But as you will see, this list is more like, yeah, okay, now I want to use get Azure AD application proxy application. And the name for the graph module is, yeah, there's none. So Microsoft has still 3 months to finish up their work and implement all the commandlets that they had planned for us to use in the future, and have to do that in Graph as well. But this website is definitely not the sole source of information. And if you just want to see how good can you migrate your current scripts over to the new commandlets, then Fred Weinmann did a great community project called PS Azure Migration Advisor. The name is not really immediately popping into mind if you think about Graph, but he has done this also for the old Azure RM modules and has a mapping there, but included the Entra mappings as well. So this will give you an opportunity to see, is your script compatible with most of the new commandlets, and if not, you will have to figure out a way around this.
I just wanted to mention this, but I just wanted to put it in the chat because that was my first thing that went in mind. Because I already used this and it's really good quality. So the mapping is really good. It's really good done. I think he will update the naming and the mapping regularly. I think that this will stay current.
He does it every time he finds something that he was missing from the old list. And if you should find something in your commandlet that you miss in the automatic translation, but find a new commandlet for that, you can also do a pull request or at least an issue for him, and he can integrate it then. Yeah. But with new scripts, we might have new and more problems. Because even if we find the right commandlet, it might not be the same syntax in the back end, so the properties will change, everything like that. So you cannot just move over from one to the other one-to-one. It's always a bit of trying out which properties you now need and what you have to provide there and in which format you have to provide it. And if there is no mapping in this, but you still want to figure out where do I find now this new commandlet for such a task, there is something that also helps, and it's the Microsoft Learn platform, where they have published under learnmicrosoft.com ENUS Graph the whole suite, as you can see on the right-hand side. There's a long list of API references. And again, we have a little drop down at the top. I know it's a bit small on this screen, but it should only be used as a reference here. You can switch between the beta endpoint and the stable V1 endpoint. And there you have different subsections where you can go into. And in many cases, I find it really helpful to search for something in there or just go through the different categories to find a new commandlet I want to use. But this can be hard. Reading your documentation is not the thing that you want to do all day. So there is a better method. Let's look at the browser developer tools. And again, let me switch over.
Do you also use find mggraph command? Are you actively using this commandlet?
No.
No. Okay.
I myself don't use it, but it's a very good to mention. I missed it completely because I never use it. That's why it's not on the list. But okay. Find mggraph, good thing. Yes, it's also very helpful.
I use it nearly all the time because I try to search for the endpoint, so like the URL of the graph endpoint, and then I can type it in, and then it will give you all the commandlets that are that use this endpoint, and you also can see the API permissions that you need for this commandlet to work. Yeah. Just a quick summary of what this is doing.
So another method to approach the whole thing is just to use the UI, because the good thing about the graph is if Microsoft has exposed something to the graph, they are in many cases using that themselves in the UI through the Entra portal or even through the Azure portal, going to Entra ID there. But let's say I want, for fun's sake, create a new user. Then I can go in here, say create new user, and on the right-hand side you will see many things loading. I will remove that. And now we say, okay, the PowerShell user group Salzach in, is it correct?
Salzach in.
Salzach.
Yeah.
Always getting that wrong. We can have a and then we have a password and everything, and let's create this user without anything. And after you finished it, you have your stuff set up. Let's say here, test account. You clear the developer tools, and I was a bit fast here, so if you don't know where to find them, you can go to the little burger menu up here, go to more tools and go to developer tools, or as you can see, you can use the command Control-Shift-I, or as I am used to it, it's F12 on Windows, so you can also get there. The first time you will press F12 in the Chrome browser, at least, it will be like, oh, are you sure you want to enable developer mode? Really? And then you have to say, yes, I'm sure I want to do this. And then it will open it up. Then you have to go to the network tab, and that you don't have all this annoying stuff about which icons were loaded. You can also put in graph.microsoft up here. And if I now click on create, you will see that there is something called batch. In many cases, now Microsoft is using this endpoint as a starting point, but sometimes they don't. If you see the batch endpoint, this means you always have to take a second peek at payload. So you go to payload, and then you can right-click and say expand recursively. So what you will find in here is everything that the portal just sent to the Graph API, and there we can see it was sending different information like a company name, a display name, a password, and we also find down here it was a post. So if you're using an API, you always have to be like, what do I want to do? Do I want to just get information, or do I want to post information? In many cases, this is creating something new. Or do I want to update existing information? And then we have the URL. So in that case, it would be graph.microsoft.com. And then, oh, sorry for that. The endpoint, in our case, we would use like the v1 endpoint / users. And to this, it was posted that there should be a new entity with this information. So, of course, this not really helps you to find the cmdlet in the first place, but with the information about the URL, about the endpoint which you have to use, you can now go to the documentation or to the find cmdlet and look exactly which cmdlet is triggering this exact endpoint, or which is interacting with this endpoint. So this is helpful, and if we go to something like the groups, let's go over here, and I click on all groups, then I will also see different batch requests, and one of those batch requests have something like a get, and there is get groups, and there's different select ID stuff. So everything that is shown here, that is requested here. This is especially if you're using brand new features that are not really well documented and not really well exposed through anything in the cmdlets, then this is the way to find this particular cmdlet in the haystack of information of the documentation or the cmdlets that you have at hand. But as you can see, this gets old really fast, and most of you don't like to fiddle with the developer tools all day.
Especially if you look at in another area, for example, of an admin, of a classical admin, there is always the challenge that they are not working with APIs because it is not their normal job that they are fiddling with APIs. So they also, they say, okay, we need the GUI like the old AD users and computers. So there should be something for controlling this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is also something that Microsoft initially missed a bit, since cmdlets in PowerShell and the modules were always meant for sysadmins. So people like me that just want to do stuff. So we want to create stuff. We want to be more effective in what we do and automate different little tasks for us, or maybe even major tasks later on. But we just want to have building blocks and set them together. And with the whole PowerShell SDK, it becomes more like, okay, now I feel like a developer. I have to look up API requests, and I have to know how to do stuff there. So it's a bit of another mindset. And That's what's challenging for many.
Yeah.
So if you think, Fabian, really nice what you showed there, but that's crazy. I don't want to do this. It's way too complex. It's way too over my head, and in my daily operations, I can't manage that kind of complexity. But still, you want to have an easy way to find which commandlet is the one to use. Then let me introduce you to Graph X-Ray. Graph X-Ray, it was a hackathon project built by great people, Eunice, Drew, Clement, Monica, and also Meryl. Now we have the full circle. Meryl, as I mentioned, is working with me on the master thing that I will present at the PowerShell Conf EU. Don't forget to buy your tickets. And this is super helpful. So if you want to build a new script, but you are not really sure what to do, but you are sure how to do it in the UI, you can do it in the browser, then let's have a look what the Graph X-Ray can do for you.
Just for summarizing the stuff, Alexander also wrote something in the chat about the find mggraph command stuff. So if you, for example, type find mggraph command /UI/users and put the method post behind it, that will return a new mg user and new mg beta user, and also will give you, what permissions do you need, and so on and so forth. So this is also very helpful for navigating, like I just said, through the whole commandlet hell of the modules. If you know the endpoint, or if you also don't have to know the endpoint. So if you have also a part of the command name, so like get command, you can search get command star something star. You can also do this with find mggraph command also. So if you don't know the endpoint, you can do dash command. I think it's the parameter for it. So just for mentioning, just for the recording.
Yeah, that's a great mention, and I think I should add a slide about that in the presentation as well, because this is exactly the missing link on how to get there easy. So we have seen the post, we have seen the /user, and with this command you now get the information. Oh, it's a new mg user or new mg beta user. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But if you are still being like, yeah, all nice and good, but I don't want to do this whole developer tools, batch, expand, whatever Fabian did there, then let's go to the Graph X-Ray. You can just download it here. So there's a good explanation. You can choose the browser that you have, and this will bring you to the store of your browser where you can then install the module. After that, you will find the module up here. Depending on the configuration, it can be that it will be not shown initially, and you have to click on extensions and this little eye, so it's not hidden by default. And at first, it will not do much. And if you click on it, you will get some information, but it's not really doing anything for you. There's a show me how, and this is a great explanation on what to do. But since we are here together, I can also show you how to do it. One thing I want to mention is you have to close your browser completely the first time you want to use it. So close your Edge browser, close your Chrome, and make sure all the background tasks those modern browsers run are also closed. So I would recommend a get process, Edge, stop process, because at least twice or 3 times I have been like, I installed it in the browser, I restarted my browser, and it was still not working. And I was trying to figure out why. And it's always because there are still some background tasks open. And if they are not closed, really, then it wouldn't work because it's not exposed at the right point here. But if you are now at this stage and you have rebooted your browser, rebooted, okay, yeah, then we go back to the, not the settings, we go back to more tools, developer tools, and now we skip this whole network stuff that I showed you before, and you click on the plus sign here, and then you have the Graph X-ray. And now we have this little helper on our right-hand side here. And now let's create a group. So we want to create a new security group. And oh, what is that? It already captures everything that is happening in the browser, just like the network monitor I just showed you did, but it will extract exact these informations that you need. So there is no batch endpoint or whatever. It will look into those requests sent or posted and will show you exactly what happened here. So in this case, there was a post to the endpoint beta role management directory estimate access. And for this, there is no commandlet that they know about. That's why it's just the information this happened. But for the get graph Microsoft.com beta settings, there is a commandlet, and there is this module that you need, the Microsoft Graph Beta Identity Directory Management, and the commandlet get mg beta directory setting. And there are different things that automatically happen in the background. So again, clear your session until you are sure that you want to do this. So again, we will create a new user group here. In this case, Inn-Salzach. And of course, we need a hello world in there with an example. And let's select a user. We already have somebody, I think, in mind. Let's visit the Salzach Inn group. And now we can click on Create. And again, this will capture what exactly happened in the browser. So it records your action at that moment, and it will give you the information that this group to create required this module, those parameters, and then this commandlet. So let me copy this out and use it in a later example, but this was really easy to just use. So I just used the UI, clicked exactly what I needed, entered the information where I wanted information, and now you have the exact example on how to use the new MG beta group. And without any of the lookup and finding stuff, but just by being in there and using the UI like you normally would. Then this does not always work as expected. So in this case, we have group post groups, and then there is the ID of the group that was created here. And then we have some group member by ref. This won't work immediately like that, because what is missing in here is the information, what is the reference. In our case, that would be the users I added. So it's not the solution that will give you everything hand-fed and everything is perfect, but it's a great solution for many of those tasks. And it's not just like in here where I just did a few things for creating a group or a user. Those you will figure out easily, but it can also handle stuff like if we go in here and create a conditional access policy. So again, I just go in here, say, okay, I want to do the PSUG Salzach in user group. So the user in here should be affected. We always want to exclude, of course, our break class account. We always want to have that on all cloud apps. Conditions we don't need, and we want to require them for authentication strengths. And we want to do like phishing resistant MFA for them. And then we set this off because this is for a later date, or you are just testing. And again, I used F12 to open up the the developer tools, switch over to Graph X-Ray, click on Create, and then it just gave me the module I will need, the example parameters that I just entered, and the cmdlet at the end. So as you can see, this is much more easy to use than what I showed you before. Developer tools, that's nice if you want to impress somebody, but Graph X-Ray, this is for if you want to get work done. If you just want to let me reproduce something here, get the information out there, and if it still can't give you the complete thing, then you still have the endpoint information right there without looking into all the nitty-gritty batch stuff. You just have it there, and it's what you need. And in that case, it's also including the IDs of the user I just scoped, the excluded break class account, the included applications, all that stuff is in here. And you can now use that in your script and move forward with the writing of your script to build something that you need without having to every time go to the docs, read the docs, and especially the part where it is extracting the configuration that is sent is really helpful, but because sometimes in rather new cmdlets, this part is really not good documented. And to have an example that you can then use and adapt for your needs and put in variables where you need them, this is just gold, because it's so much easier than figuring out, how to build the correct object and which of those might be required, which of those might not be required. That's definitely really hard if you just want to do it by yourself.
So this works for, I think for most of the Entra portal, I think. And
yes.
if it's not found something, then we also can read through the documentation of the endpoints to figure that out ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Correct. So it's working everywhere in the Entra portal as long as the graph.microsoft.com URL is called. So let's try something that is maybe not that.
I think this then will also work in Intune because this is also calling the Graph API. I think this is also working fine then, yeah.
So we can go over to the endpoint Microsoft portal. Oh, it's now Intune.Microsoft.
Right.
I have to level up on my Intune skills, or maybe not. And if we go now here to devices, you will already see everything that is calling a Microsoft endpoint, Graph endpoint will show up here. And some stuff, you won't get the cmdlet because it's not aware of this yet, but you can now use other means like the documentation, like the find mggraph cmdlet, and see if it's in there and if there is a translation for you that you can now use.
So just for asking, if you're scrolling up where the language selection is, in what languages can we, C#, JavaScript, Java, Objective-C, and Go. Okay. So we nearly
I think there is just one choice. It's PowerShell.
Normally, yes. Normally, yes. But we are also having some people who speak other languages or have to develop in other languages. So that's also a cool tool for them also.
Other languages, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Yeah, it's really great. What does not work is you cannot change in between, so it always has to do this. You have to choose before. So if you want to do C#, then you have to click it before, and then it will create the C# examples for you. And every time you switch between those, it will clear the output. But if you have something more complex and you do multiple steps, you can also use this neat save script up here. So this will just create a PowerShell file for you. So Graph X-ray session PowerShell. I will not download it now because it's not really helpful for me at the moment. Not much in there, but it will include everything that was in the session. Of course, you always should look at if you click this button, this happens, because as you have seen, just clicking on something like device compliance will immediately run different commands in the background, and many of those you won't need in your script because you don't want to display everything that is here. You just might want to update something.
Cool stuff, cool stuff. Yes.
So this brings us back to the slides. And yeah, so as I said in the beginning, if you install Microsoft Graph, there will be a lot of commandlets that you won't need for your task. And this is why there is always this little import module in the Graph X-ray as well, so that you exactly know which modules you need, because nobody is using import module these days anymore because we are used to having autoload for our modules since way back. But it is really helpful to know which ones to install so you don't have to figure that out again and again and again. Then the Microsoft Graph authentication commandlets, they are your real friend. They are the ones you always will need. So if you just want to do create user, you still need the Microsoft Graph authentication because the connection to the Microsoft Graph is always required. And if you don't find the commandlet that you want to use and you are a bit more of the developer kind, or you want to dive deeper, the invoke nggraph request is more like the Swiss Army knife, because it's just a wrapper for the API call and you can put anything in there. So you can just be like invoke nggraph method put URL this, body that. But for that, you really have to know what you do, because otherwise the Graph endpoint will be like, yeah, I don't like you. I don't like what you sent to me. I won't do anything. Or in the worst case, it will be like, yeah, I did that, and you overwritten something that you didn't want to overwrite.
But you also will meet, for example, a JSON payload in the normal PowerShell commandlets. That can also happen if you have the body parameter or some other commandlets I used in the past. They expect the JSON payload also. So you have to get familiar with this kind of stuff if you're working with the Graph API.
Yeah, I think the good example here was the commandlet that we just used for creating conditional access policies, where
Yes.
there are not like 50 parameters that you can use. You have the body parameter, and in that you have to send over a hash table that is exactly written like it should be. I think a few of those things you can leave out if they are completely empty. But again, in that case, the Graph X-ray will help you to figure that out. Or as a last resort, if this even can't figure it out, you can still use the developer tools, use the network tab, and look exactly for this payload that was sent, and then you can translate it. Maybe just one other thing to show you here. If you use the networking tab here, and let's do filter again for Graph Microsoft. The browsers also have a little built-in helper here, so you can use copy all as PowerShell, and if you put that in your PowerShell VS Code, then you will see that's really overkill. But it's exactly this call in PowerShell. So we have a web session, a web request session, the user agent that you just used, the exact endpoint that we used, all the headers, including your access token, all that stuff is in here. So this can be helpful if you really want to go deep, but it's not really what I would recommend for day-to-day use.
Yeah, in the past I used that as a starting point, and just remove the parts that are not needed and start with this when I was not so familiar with this. Because I have the request that is working, and I had the right URI and so on. Yeah.
If you don't have the knowledge about that yet, then it can get really overwhelming because there's that much information that you don't need. So always Graph X-Ray, developer tools, and copy as PowerShell as the last resort. But that would be the way I would approach something where I don't know what to use. Now, I talked a lot about different endpoints in the whole talk, and most of the stuff we saw was the beta endpoint. So while Microsoft is being like, yes, the beta endpoint, don't use that in production, we have seen that multiple of those calls that we did in the official production Azure portal, Entra portal, were done to the beta endpoint. This is because Microsoft has such a high pace in development that they have the requirement to publish a beta endpoint as a product group, I think, but there's no requirement to really move this over to V1 in a defined set of time. And that's why some of those endpoints are only available in beta and only available in beta for a long time. The big downside about using beta is that it can be that tomorrow your endpoint is no longer there. Microsoft decided, yeah, this format, it wasn't flexible enough. We had to change something here. And then they will do that. They will change it. And after some time, you might run into a problem with your script and it won't work. So preferably always try to use the V1 endpoint, but definitely you will use the beta endpoint even in production scripts. It's not avoidable. It's always there. So
just because you mentioned it in the last slide about the authentication stuff, I know it's painful, but I think we should mention how to authenticate to Graph correctly, or what's your recipe to authenticate correctly. What's the cmdlet, for example? I know it's connect mg graph, but how do you use the? Do you prefer to add the scopes at the authentication? Do you use device level authentication, or what's your preferred method to authenticate to Graph? Or are there different scenarios where you use different stuff?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So as you can see, there are different ways on how to authenticate, and one I think many use is the connect mg graph use device code. So what this does is it will create a URL or show you a URL. It's not creating it in the URL. And if you, I will have to jump back and forth a bit. Sorry about the sharing. you now go in here and be like, yes, I want to use that. And then you can select the user you are currently signed into. In that case, since I'm using a VS Code machine in GitHub, it's not at my home, but it's in the Netherlands. And this has to be enabled in your tenant. So if you're just doing this with the in your tenant and you don't have the permissions and the application is not allowed for you, then this won't work. Also, if your tenant has strict security and you are required to use something like device compliance, this won't work because device code authentication does not support device compliance. You come from a device and it cannot be checked if you are on this device really, because it's a device code. It's a cross-device authentication method. So this is one method you can do. The other one that is available is that you can say just connect mggraph. This will also open up a window. It won't work in this session because it's not an interactive one, but if you are on your machine, connect mggraph, it will open in the default browser, and then it will try also to authenticate you. Again, it has to be approved by your administrators in the tenant that you can use it. Another method is if you have a valid access token, you can also sign in through the access token. This is the least preferable method because using an access token, it's now you have to handle stuff like where do you get this access token? Okay, you can extract it out of the browser, but that's not something you want to do on a daily basis. So access token really a niche scenario, but there are some where it's really nice.
Yeah, we'll use it when I connect with a managed identity. For example, in an Azure function, you can get
for that. Just use connect mggraph identity.
Yes, before where I think the dash identity was added a bit later, and
it's
before that we had to use the access token stuff. Yes.
Yeah. But nowadays you can just use the identity.
Yes.
And what Konstantin also mentioned, and I won't go into depth on that because this would be a complete own talk, is scoping. So if you just connect mggraph, you will have, if you don't define anything, default scopes. So it will just have certain scopes it can use, and you will run into this that your script is like, yeah, you can't do this. You don't have the permission. You don't have the correct scope selected. And this is because the Graph API is reliant on the whole concept of the scopes and permissions set in Entra ID. And there is different ways. There's delegated and application. Delegated, you can understand more like if you connect yourself, this is delegated. And if you define a scope, you can put it in here. So this would be something like user read write, I think would be one valid scope. In that case, now you connect to mggraph and request that your session has the ability to change users. If you don't do that, you won't have this permission. This, as I said, it can get really complicated really fast. But one last thing I wanted to mention about the Connect mggraph is we can see there are different other things like certificate thumbprint. You can define something like the tenant ID, and also there should be something like the application ID. So if you develop an application yourself, and this should run without any interaction of a human being, always try to use managed identities if you have the ability. So if you have an Azure Automation account, enable system managed identity, give this identity the needed permissions. But if you don't have the ability to use that because you're coming from on-prem and you don't have Azure Arc. Then you can register an application, grant the needed permission scopes for this application here, and then use the application ID in conjunction with a certificate on the machine in the best case scenario. There's also the ability to use secrets. I think they now added that back. Yeah, you can now add a secret credential as well. For a long time being, it was not in there, but I think everybody was screaming, I still want to use my passwords. It's the best thing I've had since sliced bread. It's not. Use certificates, store them somewhere safe. But yeah, that's how you can connect using an application. But that is maybe something, Konstantin, we should do in another session here to talk about all the ways
I just want to briefly cover that because
that's totally fine.
Authentication is always hard, and I think a short mention about the scopes. So if you want to, if you say you want to have, for example, like Fabian said, user read write all, then you also will get the window open to consent to that right, and I think you can also have some problems if you don't have the permissions from your admin also. So you can get problems if the consent is disabled and so on.
As you can see here I have an application, and this application has the Microsoft Graph permission directory read write all. Don't use that if you can avoid it. It's a very powerful and really bad permission. And you can add those permissions here. And there's a long list of application or delegated permissions for different things. So for administrative units, you want to read the admin units. Okay, I can add that. And then you will see there's admin consent required. Yes. And it's currently not granted. So this means the application wants this, but it has not been allowed to use it yet, because this might be changed by the application admin. But the grant to allow it, this has to be done by a global admin or somebody with the correct permissions. In many cases, that might be the global admin.
Yeah. And this is, in highly regulated environments, can be a challenge to just use the scope parameter and say, oh, just YOLO it and say, okay, I want to have this right, then this won't work normally in such high regulated environments. Just for mentioning it, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And for those environments, as I said before, you can always use the access token.
That definitely, yes.
I didn't tell it. Oh, well, I'm on camera. Damn. Now it's recorded.
I will cut it out.
No worries.
Okay.
So there are two benefits I think are really important. The first one is we have to use it. So there's no way around it. And the other one I really, really like is the logging. So Microsoft Graph now has the ability to log every graph request ever sent to your tenant in a log analytics workspace. And this is amazing capability for your security team. And since I'm from the security end, I really like that. And I can have deep insights on what you do and who is doing what and who is trying to do something and who is doing something that they never done before. Stuff like that is now in the Graph API log, and we have really deep insights into that now. The other really cool benefits are stuff like the batch endpoint. So Microsoft is now using that heavily. Almost every API call they do, and even if it's just one, they use the batch endpoint. So if you progress in your whole scripting abilities in the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK, sometime you will figure out, I have to send like 50 updates, 100 updates to different users. And doing that through stuff like for each parallel, yeah, that's possible. but you can do it much more easy if you just put all those graph requests together, put them in one request to the batch endpoint and be like, hey, batch endpoint, here are 150 updates. Do them for me. And then you just check back if they were done correctly, and then you're golden. So there are really cool stuff ahead that you can do, but today we wanted to talk mostly about how to get started, what to do about it, and I think the whole Microsoft Graph endpoint is, the whole Microsoft Graph X-Ray is super powerful. It's definitely something to check out if you start to work with that, because it helps you to get started in the whole Microsoft Graph environment. And the people here, they have done an amazing job, and you will find really helpful information. And if you should be like, oh, Fabian did tell me so much today about the Graph X-Ray, but I forgot most of it, and you don't want to rewatch the whole thing on YouTube, then the explanation that they built into the tool, it's also wonderful. So just go in here, show me how, and then you have a nice explanation. There's an animated GIF on how to use it, all that stuff. So really cool. And I think this makes the whole journey from the old commandlets to Graph much more approachable.
And also, you can also follow, or you should follow Meryl on every platform, because he is very actively, especially on X or Twitter, because he does, or he makes wonderful tools. For example, you can, I think now with one of his tools, create a slide deck of all the conditional access policies and so on. So there are very nice tools from Meryl to check out. And he also, I think he does also do YouTube videos about some work he's doing, or some features.
Yeah, he started last year to really get into that. And the just mentioned idpowertoys.com, there you can find the conditional access documenter, and it will create nice little PowerPoint documentation about the whole conditional access rule set that you have. And this is really cool if you have to do documentation and you want to have something that is readable even by somebody who might not know that much about the conditional access. So that's really nice. And Entra mind map, also nice pet project of him. Different information like, okay, I want to know more about licenses, where to go, and then there is this jump to the learn articles of Microsoft. So definitely also worth checking out and worth looking at. So that's from me for today. I hope I could bring you the whole Microsoft Graph and how to use it a bit more to you, and on how to use the Graph X-Ray in your journey to get there. If you have any questions, please feel free to come off mute. And I don't know, Konstantin, if we skip recording here or later on, we also can take questions in German if you don't want to talk English, or in the chat.
Yeah.
So feel free on how do you want to approach.
So, are there any questions in the chat? There is nothing. Raimund, thank you for being here. See you next meeting, or in Antwerpen then. Thank you. Are there any questions for Fabian? Now the specialist is here. Don't hesitate. When will be the next meeting in the PowerShell user group Hamburg, I think?
So yeah, we will meet in about 2 weeks, and you will find us also on Meetup. Let me just post the link down here. On the 21st of February, we will talk a bit about the Microsoft Defender for Identity PowerShell module that was just released in January, and it's a really nice helper to get started in the whole Microsoft Defender for Identity implementation, which can be a bit daunting if you read the documentation. The Let's Get Started is really long on that, and this is a really helpful commandlet to get you there faster. And we maybe have also a second session, which is not yet finalized. So I hope that we have 2 sessions on that day. And we are also hybrid, so you can join via Teams as well. So feel free to join us there.